Hey everybody, in today's video we're going to talk about the traditional IRA and the income limits associated with it. If you haven't already checked out the last video titled Roth IRA Income Limits, I encourage you to check that out. Basically, the last video compared to this video, we're talking about Roth IRA last time, this time traditional IRA. With the Roth IRA, it's a little bit more straightforward. So with the Roth IRA, basically the way the income limits work is they say if you make below this amount, you can contribute to a Roth IRA. If you make above it, or you fall between that phase out range, you can only contribute a portion or a percentage of the maximum contribution. So they're pretty straightforward, but the traditional IRA income limits are a little bit different, which we'll talk about today. So with the traditional IRA, the first thing I need to mention is, and just reiterate, because I've talked about this in previous videos, with the traditional IRA, one of the main advantages of setting up a traditional IRA and contributing to a traditional IRA is that you can potentially deduct your contributions that you make to a traditional IRA from your taxable income. So a quick example, if your taxable income for the year is $40,000 and you contributed the maximum of $6,000 to your traditional IRA that year, you can deduct from the $40,000 taxable income, you can deduct $6,000 in contributions to your traditional IRA, and that'll leave you with a taxable income of $34,000. So with traditional IRAs, you can deduct your contributions usually. And today's income limits will give you a better idea of whether or not you can deduct or not. So with that being said, there's really two questions that need to be asked, or actually just one question that needs to be asked before we go over the income limits, and that is this. Are you covered by are you covered by an employer plan, which is why I wrote it right here, covered by employer plan? If the answer is yes, then these income limits apply to you. Now, the question is, you're probably wondering, okay, well, what do you mean by covered by employer plan? So what I mean by that, and what the IRS means by that, is if your employer offers some type of retirement plan, like a 401k, for example, then you are covered. If they don't offer some type of retirement plan to their employees, including yourself, then you are not covered. If you're not covered, I'm going to go over those income limits in just a little bit on the flip side. But if you are covered by an employer plan, these are the income limits. So this is how it works. If you're married and filing jointly, you have to make less than $109,000 for 2022 in order to be able to fully deduct your contributions to your traditional IRA. So what that means is, if you're married and you're filing joint tax return and you make less than $109,000 in 2022, you're in the last video we talked about modified adjusted gross income. We're talking about modified adjusted gross income here with the traditional IRA as well. So all these amounts here pertain to your modified adjusted gross income. Okay, forgot to mention that. It's very important. So if you're married filing jointly and your modified adjusted gross income is less than $109,000 for 2022, what that means is however much you contribute into your traditional IRA in 2022, you can deduct 100% of that amount from your taxable income. So if you contributed $6,000 in 2022 to your traditional IRA, and your taxable income was $50,000, you can deduct all $6,000 which you contributed to your traditional IRA from that $50,000 figure, and that'll leave you with a taxable income of $44,000. That's just an example. So the bottom line is, if you fall below this threshold, you can deduct 100% of your contributions from your taxable income. So If you're single or head of household, that income limit changes to $68,000. So if you're single or head of household and your modified adjusted gross income is less than $68,000, you can deduct all the contributions that you make into your traditional IRA, up to $6,000. And remember, if you're age 50 or older, instead of the $6,000 being the maximum, it's $7,000. So the only question now is, all right, well, what if I make more than these amounts? What if my modified adjusted gross income is more than $109,000 if I'm married filing jointly? It's a great question. So if you make between if your modified adjusted gross income is between $109,000 and $129,000 for 2022, and you're married filing jointly, you fall within that phase-out range, which means a percentage of the contributions that you made to your traditional IRA can be deducted from your taxable income. Not 100% of the contributions, just a percentage. And you're going to have to fill out a worksheet, or whoever prepares your tax return is going to have to fill out a worksheet, an IRS worksheet, to calculate just how much of that contribution can be deducted. So the closer you are to 109,000, the higher that percentage is to 100%. The closer you are to 129,000, the closer that number is to 0%. Okay, and if you have if your modified adjusted gross income is $129,000 or more, what that basically means is you can still contribute to a traditional IRA, but you just cannot deduct the contributions that you made to that traditional IRA from your taxable income. So that's very important. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of whether or not a traditional IRA makes sense for you if you're looking to deduct your contributions. Single head of household, $68,000 is the threshold, but if you make between $68,000 and $78,000 for your modified adjusted gross income for 2022, you fall within that phase-out range. So if you are between $68,000 and $78,000 modified adjusted gross income and you're single or head of household, you're not going to be able to deduct 100% of your contributions made to your traditional IRA. You're only going to be able to deduct a percentage of, so between 0% and 100%. The closer you are to $68,000, the closer you are to being able to deduct 100% of your contribution. The closer you are to $78,000, the closer you are to 0% that you'll be able to deduct from your taxable income. So again, just to summarize, these figures pertain to you if you are covered by your employer plan, an employer plan. So if your employer offers something like a 401k, for example, you answer yes, and these income limits apply to you. Now, if you are not covered by an employer plan, if they do not offer like a 401k or something like that, then these income limits would apply to you. Okay. So we're asking the same question here. Are you covered by an employer plan? If your answer is no, the income limits are different, as you can see. So if you're married filing jointly, your modified adjusted gross income has to be less than $204,000. So obviously that's higher from if you answered yes. Compare $204,000 to $109,000. It's a pretty big difference. So if you are not covered by an employer plan and you're married filing jointly, if you make less than $204,000 together, that means that you can deduct 100% of the contribution made to your traditional IRA for 2022. Again, that's $6,000 for everybody except for people that are 50 and older. If you're 50 and older, the maximum contribution is $7,000. So that's married filing jointly. Now, again, there's a phase out. So if you make above $204,000, you're probably wondering, can I still deduct some of my contributions? The answer is yes. And the phase out range is $204,000 to $214,000. So if you make between $204,000 and $214,000, meaning your modified adjusted gross income for 2022 is between $204,000 and $214,000, that means that you can deduct a portion or a percentage of the contribution that you made into your traditional IRA. So, for example, if you contributed $6,000 to your traditional IRA this year in 2022, and you fall within that phase-out range, you're not going to be able to deduct all $6,000 from your taxable income. It's going to be a percentage of that $6,000. So maybe 90%, 80%, 25%. It all depends on your modified adjusted gross income. The closer you are to $204,000, the closer you are going to be to that 100% deduction. If you're closer to $214,000, that means you're going to be closer to 0%, which means almost none of the contribution that you made to your traditional IRA is going to be deductible. So if you make above $214,000, that means you're not going to be able to deduct any of the contributions that you made to your traditional IRA for 2022. All right. And last but not least, if you're single or head of household and you're not covered by an employer plan, there's no limit. So there was a limit if you answered yes to the question, if you're covered by an employer plan and you answered yes, there's a limit as to your modified adjusted gross income. You can only make $68,000 or less in order to fully deduct your contribution. But if you're not covered by an employer plan, there's no limit. It doesn't matter how much money you make, you'll be able to deduct all of your contributions from your taxable income if you're single or head of household. So that's pretty nice. That's really nice, actually. So that's all of the information that I have for you. Just a couple things to summarize real quick. With the traditional IRA, the whole point is to be able to, one of the main advantages of setting up a traditional IRA and contributing to a traditional IRA is the ability to deduct your contributions from your taxable income. Meaning, if you contribute $6,000, that's $6,000 less that you'll be responsible for paying taxes for. So it's a huge advantage, but it can be a huge advantage, but it depends on how much money you make. So today's video, we went over what the income limits are. Watch the video again if you need to, just to refresh your memory. I know this is not the most fun topic to go over when it comes to investing, but it is something that is necessary. So I hope you learned something new today. Hope that you can take this information, go out and use it. As always, like the video if you liked it. Leave a comment if you have any questions or just want to leave a comment. Share the video if you got something from it and you want to share it with somebody else that you think could benefit from it as well. And of course, subscribe. The next video is probably going to be about emergency funds. It's probably going to be about emergency funds, so be sure to subscribe and be notified whenever that video comes out. I'm not too sure exactly what the next video is going to be. I'm going over about 2 or 3 options, but it's probably going to be about emergency funds. So be sure to subscribe if you want to check that out, or just check out the next video, whatever it is. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a positive day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Signing out for now. Take care.